as I can, it's really not doing very much. He's just literally dragging me along. Hi there, Dominique here, back with another London Self-Defense Academy video. We're again focusing on self-defense for women. And today we're going to talk through the top 3 self-defense moves to avoid. So I'm obviously not saying that there's no place for these moves in the world of women's self-defense. It's just that these moves are, for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk through, less likely to succeed in a conflict scenario where you have to think quickly and efficiently. However, of course, before we get started, always remember that the best move to use in any scenario is no move at all. So if you can get yourself out of the situation without resorting to violence, you should absolutely go for that first. With that in mind, let's look at the top 3 moves to avoid. Okay, so our first one of our top 3 moves to avoid using is the push. Now, it's not that a push can never be effective. In fact, a push can be a very effective tool to use if I first destabilize my opponent. So if he's already a bit wobbly on his feet, he's already liable to fall down, then I can execute a nice and controlled push. However, if I just attempt to use the push as my first move in a conflict scenario, as a small woman with a relatively larger attacker, it's gonna be hard for me to recruit enough force to make that push really effective. Even if I push him as hard as I can, it's really not doing very much. He's just literally dragging me along with him. So instead, what should we do? What can we switch out a push for that might be more effective? Well, we want to use a move that might recruit more strength into a smaller point of our body. So instead of going for a push, think about what else you can use. My personal favorite is the palm strike. So if he's coming towards me, this is a way more effective way to counter it. And we've got a detailed video explaining the palm strike if you'd like to learn more about it. Now, second move to avoid is the groin kick. Now, you might react to this by saying, guys are always saying how much that hurts. Surely if I go for the groin, that's going to be super effective. The answer to that is yes, sure. It's super effective as long as you get it right. And it's actually a pretty easy move to get wrong sometimes. The reason for that is that the groin is a relatively small part of the body. So if I'm attempting to strike the groin, it's actually quite easy for me to miss. And if I do miss, what happens? If I'm trying to strike the groin and I miss, I'm hitting the fleshy part of the thigh. This bit is covered in muscle and it's quite thick, so it doesn't really hurt that much. I'm not achieving anything by striking my opponent there. The second reason why it's not a move I tend to use very much is exactly because it's been made so popular. So it's something that a lot of attackers might be anticipating, and if they're anticipating it, they'll know how to block it. And on top of that, it's relatively easy to block. All my opponent has to do is move their hips from side to side, and then suddenly I've got a moving target. There's nothing I can do. I can't really get around anywhere. So what's effective to replace the groin kick with? We discussed this in our top 3 self-defense moves for women, and it's one of the moves I think is super effective, and it's the shin kick. So instead of trying to aim for the small sensitive area of the groin that's easily blocked, I can instead use my foot to aim at the bony part of the shin, which is not only much larger, so easier for me to hit, it's also not covered by any muscle or fat significantly, so it's actually going to hurt a lot more, even if my hit is not very targeted. So the last of our top 3 moves to avoid is the punch. So unless you've got quite extensive boxing training, it's often quite hard to throw an effective punch. For women, this is particularly important as well, because we tend to have smaller hands. And what happens when you've got small hands? You've got small, delicate bones in your hand. So even if you're quite effective at throwing a punch, and even if your punch is successful in actually hurting your opponent, what you might do in the process as well is either fracture or break some of the small delicate bones in your hand, and we don't want to do that. A good move to replace a punch with, and I talk about this all the time, is again the palm strike. This recruits this part of your hand, which is much fleshier, much wider, less easy to injure, and therefore if you just use that instead of using your fist, you're reducing the likelihood that you will get injured by a significant percentage. Thanks for watching our video. I really hope you enjoyed that and that you found it useful. If you have any questions about anything we've said or anything we've demonstrated, please leave them in the comments. And as always, we would be so grateful if you could show us your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel as well. See you very soon.